Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Cioffi. Welcome to, I guess we call it Coffee with Cioffi on a Sunday morning at 10 a.m. And we've got a lot happening with an Arctic front that's going to be approaching. In the meantime, we're seeing temperatures bounce up today. We have snow in the forecast for the interior Northeast and maybe a cheap thrill snow for Tuesday morning into the afternoon for some coastal areas, and more action going on down the road. It's going to get very cold. This air mass coming down for the middle of next week is actually colder than the one we just went through, and that was certainly cold enough. So anomalies are going to be running minus 20, minus 25 or more in some places before it's all said and done. I'm just going to put the chat on my phone so this way I can see what you guys are saying while I got the maps up, because otherwise I can't do both at the same time. I can't have the because of for technical reasons. But I'm just going to set this up here and give me a second. Just have to turn the sound down on the media, which I forgot to do. And it's all set. We'll bring up the live stream on the phone. And this is all going to work out pretty well. So, by the way, today is the anniversary of the 44th anniversary of the sinking of the Edmund Fitzgerald, which occurred in Lake Superior back on this date in 1975. And the chairman, Scott Briller, reminded me about that. So I said, okay, so we'll do some stuff on that today. And it was very interesting to find out. There were a couple of things that struck me reading about the Edmund Fitzgerald, and just knowing where we are now in terms of you would think that these sorts of things wouldn't happen. And I saw that one of you mentioned um, here just a few moments ago on the chat. Who was it here? Here we go. I'm going to try and find it. Um, let's see. You guys were all well, Bill William Hoover. By the way, your temperature was right this morning with regards to what's going on in the Pine Barrens. Okay, so let your wife know that. But you point out that you would think no ship would sink due to weather, but still putting greed over people's lives. Let me remind you, if you look back over the last couple of years, we had a couple of those ocean liners coming up in the wintertime that came up during major gales. We're talking about, I forgot, back, it was 2 years ago in January of 17. And I actually had a friend of mine that was on this boat. I'm not going to mention which one it was, but you can find it on the internet yourself. But they not only decided that it was perfectly reasonable to sail a ship into a 955 low of 955 millibar low, which is the equivalent to a certain extent of a Category 2 hurricane. That was fine and dandy, but then to even claim that it was something that wasn't even forecasted, which was really one of the it was just that was just an absolute lie. It wasn't even. You can't even find a word strong enough to emphasize the fact that that was a lie. Okay, uh, so could this something like this happen again? Sure. Johnny Quest, you said ships sink all the time, and that's quite true. It still could happen again, and some of it is just um, chance event, and maybe everything gets to the wrong place at the wrong time. You read about the Edmund Fitzgerald and some very interesting facts about Lake Superior that I didn't know, talking about the fetch of wind going across from west to east. All the water was piling on because it was in the eastern part of Lake Superior. And not really that far off land, by the way. When you look at it, it was in a very narrow part of that lake, relatively speaking. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. So let's get started here with what's happening. First off, I just wanted to bring up at least the low temperatures this morning, which were uh, pretty much in the mid 20s to low 30s. We managed to have clear skies and light winds for at least part of the night before clouds came in during the early morning hours, and that kind of put a stop to how low temperatures could get. But certainly the vast majority of the area from northeast Virginia through southern New England saw temperatures that got down into the 20s. And those 20s even extended up into northern New England, and they even dropped down further south into the Carolinas and up into North Georgia, 20s and low 30s. So it was a rather cold night. We've got this first air mass. Um, you've got this first air mass that is pulling out, this first cold air mass, and the next one that is going to follow, as we said, is going to be even colder. And in the transition, we have snow in the forecast. And let's put up the maps here. I'm sorry, my fault. I got so wrapped up in my conversation, I forgot to bring the maps up. And you guys didn't remind me either. So hang on one second. It's a good thing I double checked this. So here's our snowfall forecast map from the Weather Service. Now, the one thing I would just add is when I was looking at some of the local maps, they do have areas that are just south of the southern flank of this under an area of less than an inch. So, just bear that in mind. This is really more for areas that are going to get at least an inch of snow or more. And notice that the amounts are a bit more substantial, and we're starting to see the first winter storm watches that are being posted up for parts of northeastern New York. I'll get to those in a second. But forecast amounts of 6 to 8, 6 to 10 in some places across upstate New York into northern Vermont and northernmost New Hampshire, and up also into northern Maine. So this is going to be definitely an interior event. Also seeing actually some fairly significant snows being forecasted in and around the Great Lakes for Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, and into West Virginia, and even into some of the mountains of Tennessee, and reaching into western North Carolina, because this is a cold air mass that's coming down with the Arctic front, and this is snowfall, by the way, that includes anything that falls between now and 7 a.m. Wednesday. So this is not all going to be for tonight or tomorrow. Some areas, obviously the Midwest and lower lakes are going to get into this first when the Arctic front swings through later tonight and tomorrow, and then the areas further to the east will see it for late Monday night, and on into Tuesday. So that Arctic front is setting up now. It looks like the boundary has just moved through, or is very close to Chicago. Temperatures ahead of it this morning have now, at least as of 7 a.m. across Illinois and Indiana, you can see those numbers have jumped up into the 40s. While you go behind it, you're looking at 30s and 20s, and then you start to get into the teens. And then ultimately, when you move up into Canada, you've got the single digits below zero numbers because, of course, there's your high. 10 looks like a 1045-ish millibar high that is going to be driving southeastward and spreading cold air across the plains, the Great Lakes, the lower and middle Mississippi Valley, and all the way on to the East Coast before it's all said and done. And speaking of the East Coast, we've got our high now is offshore, so we've got the southwest winds ahead of it. And finally, temperatures are going to bounce up quite nicely today as we reach up into the upper 40s and low 50s. The one thing that holds temperatures back a bit is the fact that we're still working through some clouds this morning. You see them here on the satellite loop. I'm just going to freshen this up a little bit and get a few newer frames. And you'll see those clouds that came in last night and this morning. There's still a few around, and we're just kind of on the southern edge here of the jet stream pattern, which is driving these troughs that are coming down in from the from Canada, and you still have you're getting a bit of a warm up here that is occurring, but ultimately you're going to see a short wave that's going to swing around, drive southeastward, and swing around and bring in the next shot of cold air. Don't have a lot of subtropical moisture here. You'll notice that it's pretty quiet across the Gulf states and back through Florida. Not really too much happening there. you're seeing a little bit of moisture coming in off of the Pacific subtropics over the Baja Peninsula into Mexico and West Texas. There is an upper low that is out here, but that is staying separate. We've got this split flow, and at least from the standpoint of what's happening at the moment, the uh, we're seeing that the subtropical moisture is not going to be part of this equation. So it really is going to be whatever we can do with the northern stream shortwave that is going to be coming down as far as snow is concerned. So here's the radar at the moment. So this is as of 10:10 a.m. So just remember, if you're watching this later, it's dated. And we don't have a whole lot of action other than the fact that that warmer air is creating a little bit of precip aloft in eastern Pennsylvania and through parts of upstate New York, which is something that often happens when you go from a really cold air mass to a much warmer one in a hurry. And it's all relative here. All we're doing here, we're not even bringing temperatures, by the way, even today with a bounce up into the upper 40s and low 50s. We're not even bringing, in my area, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, we're not even bringing those temperatures back to near average. We're still going to be below average today and probably get close to average or maybe a shade above average on Monday before we go back into much colder air. And in that colder air, by the way, seeing some snow moving across Montana and in through parts of the Dakotas. We do have some weather warnings going on up in that particular area. We've got a large area of winter weather advisories over the state of Montana, northeastern Wyoming, and into parts of North and South Dakota, the western parts of the state. Winter storm watches up for northeastern New York, northern Vermont, and also a very tiny, no, that is northern Vermont, nothing yet up for New Hampshire. And we have also winter storm watches up for parts of the upper peninsula of Michigan. So bear that in mind here that we do have, some winter weather here going on. And of course, on the other side of that frontal boundary that runs up the Rockies into Western Canada, you've got rather stable air over and stagnant air over parts of Washington and Oregon and Idaho. So you've got all these dense fog advisories going on in that area. So let's take a look at where models are taking us today, because we are again setting up for something here for Monday night and for Tuesday in my area for me, and also for later today, tonight, and tomorrow, and into Tuesday for areas across the Midwest and Northeast. So what's happening is, of course, we're seeing the jet stream just kind of pivoting around. There's a new shortwave trough, and here we are Monday morning with a rather impressive looking shortwave here. Now, not all shortwaves wind up creating big storms, okay? And that's the situation here. You've got some strong energy in the upper atmosphere, but you don't have, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that you've got this southern stream energy right down here is kind of split away. It's not going to be getting involved with this upper trough, so it has less to work with. And of course, we don't see, when the flow is basically generally, west or west southwest across the south, and you're not having that subtropical input, there's not a whole lot here that you can work with. And the Atlantic is kind of shut off. So you get this trough to drop down and swing around. And this is the new NAM, by the way, that came out started coming out at 9 this morning. Now let me just point out that for some reason, and I can't understand why, but the critical time periods that we need to see with regards to the north to my area, which would be from hour 45 to hour 54, okay, on the NAM, they're missing. I don't know why. We have everything through 42 hours, everything after 57 hours, and the four map periods 45, 48, 51, 54, which are the ones that we really need to see, they didn't come in. I'm not sure why. I'll look around in some of the other spots, some of the other channels in a minute to see if we can. I'm sorry, not channels, but map sources. I'll take a look on Pivotal Weather in a minute and see if they have it. This is on Tropical Tidbits. It could be just a technical issue. It could be an NCEP issue too, so we'll see. but the trough just swings. By the way, it doesn't go negative. If you notice here, you still got this sort of positively tilted trough, and that's kind of what you would need to see anyway if you want to see a changeover to snow, given the position of and where the upper low is. It's so far to the north that if it were to go negative, we would just have a deepening low going by, mainly west of the coast. So it wouldn't matter from that respect. You wouldn't get any snow out of it anyhow. And then of course it does run up into Canada. You see it here, and you really do have a very cold flow of air that is coming down into the eastern part of the United States. And that jet, by the way, gets pretty far south here. It goes all the way down into northern Florida. So you are going to see that cold air penetrate pretty far down to the south, at least through the southeast. And notice, by the way, that system that was in the subtropical jet remains split. It remains just sitting there crossing Mexico, and it'll probably make some kind of low eventually later this week in the Gulf of Mexico. So you get this upper trough through it. Of course, you're going to generate a little bit of precip ahead of it with Arctic fronts. They usually don't produce a whole lot. I don't think this one's going to be any different. You are going to see a deepening low that is going to be running a deepening little wave that's going to run up, and that really creates the snow for the areas that are up north and west of the coast. Again, right around the lower lakes, Ohio Valley. You saw that snow map from before. So let's go from here. I'm going to take. We'll get the surface map up and see again. Those critical time periods are missing for the east, 51 and 54. I don't understand why, but here's how it plays out today, of course, and we see through this afternoon, we've got this west-southwest flow in the east, so we warm up nicely, and then of course the frontal boundary is running by late today, just kind of crossing into western New York and northwestern PA, and it goes back into this low that's in northeast New Mexico. Your cold air is starting to come in. Really, the coldest air is still going to be from the lakes westward, and particularly up into the northern plains where you see that high. And you get some upslope snows, by the way, from South Dakota on up in through Montana, which, when you get these highs that come down like this, they create easterly winds, and that creates upslope up the Rockies, and you wind up with some snowfall out of it. Sometimes it can be substantial, sometimes not. In this case, it looks like it could put down a decent amount of snow in some places. Now, as we go into the overnight and tomorrow morning, you start to see the Arctic front kind of pivot a bit in the east as the upper trough swings around. So you get snow that breaks out across Nebraska and into North Kansas, and then swings over into Missouri, Illinois, over Chicago, Michigan, and you start to see some snow breaking out in upstate New York and into Vermont, New Hampshire, and your frontal boundary is just right on the coast at this point. Always remember, if you live in the north, if you live in my neck of the woods of the Northeast, okay, if it starts to snow in upstate New York, in northeastern New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire before it starts to snow down the coast, you 99 times out of 100, that means that the coast is not going to get very much out of this unless it's a special type of situation. And this doesn't look like it's going to be one of those special types of situations. Now your wave, the problem here is that whenever we talk about where the upper trough is, the problem here is that the upper trough is in a position where you're bringing the wave up too far to the west. Always in cases like this, it's a race between the cold air and the wave going by with the precip. And 9 times out of 10, in the coastal areas of the Northeast, particularly when we talk about southeastern and southern New England, not so much up in northeastern New England, but we talk about southeast New England, southern New England, down to the northern mid-Atlantic states. The vast majority of the time, you're going to get the low to go by first on the front, and then the Arctic boundary comes on through. In this case, you do have the wave is not really well developed. It's still pretty flat. So there is perhaps a little bit of energy that's kind of left back on the bottom part of where the isobars make that V. So you get to the upper trough swinging by, and that's creating some precip that's on the back side that goes all the way down into South Carolina and Georgia in the form of some light rain. And you see where your snows are, coming down. Now you've got the lakes, wind bringing some lake effect action down through eastern Ohio, West Virginia, and into Western Virginia and Western North Carolina. Now this would be Tuesday morning. And then, of course, you've got your back edge snows as the colder air comes rushing in this zone. And this is where you could wind up seeing, that rain changing to snow before ending scenario. And now, of course, you're going to see it end because we're missing that 6 hour period. So by the time we get to late Tuesday afternoon, the front is already at this point. Sorry about that, just banged on the mic by accident. But at this point, the front is long gone, and now you bring down the really cold air into the eastern part of the United States. You know, outside chance that this area winds up with a burst that produces a coating at most an inch in some places. It's not going to be anything beyond that. All right, so we're going to have to cheat today. I'm going to pull up a snow map just to see what it does, and hopefully that's not even out far enough on the NAM. So here we are. There must be some NSEP problems, as usually by this time all the maps are done. So I guess we're just going to have to wait to see if they wind up filling in the blanks. Let's see if the icon model is out far enough, and it might very well be. So let's give it a whirl. And now the icon model's been kind of suggesting that there would be a changeover to snow. I'm going to use a wider view here. We'll start with the U.S. view so you folks out west can see what's going on with your weather here, because you are going to see that swath of snow moving down from Montana, Wyoming, and touching parts of Colorado there with that little bit of upslope. And there's your wave here for early Tuesday morning. Your frontal boundary goes through, so there is a little bit of a hint here on the icon that there could be a change at the very end. I'm grasping at straws for snow lovers in my particular area, because I'm sure they would just like to see, even if it's just a couple of hours of some snowflakes coming down, they would find that most exciting. So we'll see if we can work that out. But this high, by the way, goes all the way down into North Texas. So you're seeing a really significant push of colder air here that comes into the Northeast. And into the northern mid-Atlantic states by the time we get to Wednesday. It also seems that, like, in terms of the extremes, with regards to temperatures, the models have slightly backed off from that because this next high is going to go by to our north, and I think what's going to result from that is that we're going to see the cold hang around for a while. It's going to moderate from the levels that we're going to have on Wednesday, but it's not going to moderate as fast as you might think as we go into the end of the week and the weekend. There's going to be another front with maybe another high coming down. This one will impact mostly the Northeast and not so much the areas out to the west. You can see the high, by the way, goes into upstate New York for later Wednesday and Wednesday night. There'll be a lot of radiational cooling come Wednesday night too, so that's going to impact the temperatures as well. So the icon model has the same idea here with respect to what it thinks is going to happen with the upper flow, and we could actually take a look at the setup of the upper air here, which is out to 84 hours at least. So let me just back this up. And just watching you guys. Oh, Mike Piero, the 3 kilometer is out all the way through, so we'll take a look. So let's take a look at this. Here we go. Swing that trough through here. Of course, this was from Friday. We got our cold air mass. The jet stream pulls up, and then the next trough swings in. This is, of course, our system for Monday night, Tuesday. That goes out, and now you see they're still troughing back into. You still have the main flow. Hang on a second, folks. Trying to get the here's another there's another trough here. that's swinging around. Here's your first lead trough. You still have a ridge up in the west, and the flow from Western Canada, at least as we go into Wednesday night and Thursday, is still in place. It's not like the whole upper pattern is breaking down here. It really isn't. It's just kind of, it's kind of rearranging itself a little bit. You've got, one trough lifting up here, another upper low back in northwest of Hudson Bay. So, it's kind of trying to pivot around, and you still have, by the way, an upper low sitting at about 160 with general troughing down to about Hawaii. So this is all still favoring a negative East Pacific oscillation. It's also still favoring a troughing in the eastern part of the United States. So let's go to the NAM 3. Let's go back to the NAM 3 kilometer and see what that does. Hang on a second here, folks. I'm gonna have to reheat my coffee soon because it's been sitting here on the table. So here's the NAM 3 kilometer. This particular version of the NAM is not the best version to look at when it comes to wintertime weather. It's a lot better when it comes to dealing with thunderstorms and stuff that's more convective. But there's your Arctic front, and you see that changeover behind it. It's a very, very narrow band of snow that it produces and then rides out and goes off into the sunset. Uh, the new NAM with those missing time frames probably is going to show the same thing. I can't imagine that it wouldn't show the same thing. And here, at least we'll get an idea from the standpoint of snowfall. Now, even though there's a changeover, you'll notice where the southern edge of the precip, and I actually kind of agree with this look where you wind up where the darkest blue is probably where you're going to see the southern edge of a coating. And this is as of 7 p.m. Wednesday when the precip's long gone. So I really, at least with respect to the coastal areas, uh, other than the fact that you'll probably see some flakes flying in the air, I really don't see any huge issue here. I mean, you might see a few flakes flying through the air. Perhaps I've got that southern edge drawn a little bit too far to the south, but that would be about it. And in the meantime, on the other end of this, you see the action and the snowfall being forecast for upstate New York and up through north central New York and northeastern New York, where you could be 8 to 12 up in that area if the NAM is correct. I don't have a particular problem with these numbers. You might want to shade when you look at these snowfall maps. Probably the best thing to do is to at least take off 20 or 30% off the numbers as far as snowfall is concerned, especially maybe when you figure out where the higher numbers are going to be. It's sometimes these models can go a little bit off the wall, so you might want to shave about 20% off the snowfall maps to get a better idea. And also, of course, the further out you go in time, the less accurate these maps. I've said many times, and I still believe that they are really not useful forecast tools at all. So they're kind of fun to look at, I guess. And certainly those snow weenies out there, you guys will look at the long range and you'll just kind of see these. Sometimes these models will produce these ridiculous 20 and 30-inch amounts, only to find those storms being taken away on the very next run. So it really is a big exercise in futility to even to look at them or even have use them with any kind of value. When you're inside 48 or 60 hours, they're okay. I would say they're okay to use, but just be careful with some of the numbers that they throw out on a daily basis. And of course, we're on our way to the winter here, so we're only at the very beginning of all this torture that we're going to have with model runs and snowstorms and everything else. So we'll come back to it's 10:30. So what we'll do is let's go to the the Edmund Fitzgerald and take a look at that. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. And then we're going to come back. We'll take a look at the GFS, which will have started. But if you Google the date, November 10th, 1975, this was the the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. If any of you that are my age, if you're in your 50s and 60s, you should know Gordon Lightfoot's song about the gales of November. Remember the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. It honors this tragedy that occurred on November 10th, 1975. And one of the things I discovered is that if you go to if you Google that date, you should be able to access this article here from Weather Underground, from the weather historian in Weather Underground, who writes about November 10th, a day of weather infamy for the Great Lakes. And the Great Lakes states in the upper Midwest. And, just like apparently October 29th seems to be the kind of date, it seems to be the date around uh, where we've been seeing, we had Sandy, we had the snowstorm back in 2011 on that date. That very end of October also brings back memories of a couple of big nor'easters in the early 90s, the Halloween storm in, I believe, 1992, if I remember correctly. So there's something about, there seems to be something about that particular date, that time. And one of the points that this article makes is that it seems that that's usually around the time where you see a seasonal transition from more toward wintertime weather around that time. So you could make the case that that is a period where there's an extreme atmospheric, perhaps the atmosphere is far more volatile during that time frame when you're about to make that switch. I guess if you think back, you think to the storms that we had at the end of October. That was just recently. They are, especially the one that produced all that severe weather. That probably was the atmosphere blowing a trumpet saying that, you know what, it's time to move on to the next season. And one of the other things that struck me with regards to one of these dates here is that in 1911, okay, in 1911, in the, let's call it the pre-climate, the pre media driven, hysterics driven climate change conversation. There was a great the great cold front and tornado outbreak of 19 and 11, and you can read about it here along with the stuff about the Edmund Fitzgerald. But they talk about EF4 tornadoes up in the Dakotas in early November in 1911. So it's not, when you have certain gas bags um, pontificating about the fact that we've never seen, we have never seen storms like this before in upstate New York. We've never had hurricanes. We never had tropical storms. We never had epic lake effect snows. Um, I would just point out that we have, and and leave it at that. So no less than 5 incredible weather events have occurred around these dates. The Great Cold Front and Tornado Night outbreak in 1911. This is for the Midwest and Great Lakes, of course. The White Hurricane, the Armistice Day blizzard in 1940, the Edmund Fitzgerald storm in 1975, and the super cyclone of 1998. So as recently as 1998, there's been an historical storm that has occurred. Now, specific with the Edmund Fitzgerald, there is a website here called gcaptain.com. And actually, this is a really informative. You go to G, and I'll put the link up in the chat. But actually, this is a very, very, it seems to me, and I'm not a boater, but judging from the information that I read through here and what they wrote about with respect to the storm, there's a lot of very, very interesting stuff. And I want to just kind of focus on a couple of things. One is the actual weather map on that day. And there was, a 980-ish low, a very deep low that moved into Lake Superior. These are this is kind of this is off the old National Weather Service maps, the way they looked like in those days. But you did have a really wrapped up gale center that was moving up over Lake Superior. And one of the things that happened is if you see where the wreck is, which is where the X is marked, and this is a map of wave heights. So in terms of the fetch, and not understanding storms that happen that are outside your general area that you don't really often pay attention to, and particularly in that time when you did not get a whole lot of information with respect to weather stories in those days. It's not like today where there's just information overload about anything you want. But one of the things the piece points out, if you notice where the wreck is, it's in the eastern part of Lake Superior where the coastlines start to narrow. So it's not like it's sitting somewhere in the middle of the lake. I was actually, I didn't realize that the wreck was that far to the east. But because of where the low tract up across Lake Superior with the westerly wind and the westerly fetch of the waves, as explained in the article here, the wave heights generally increased as you moved eastward. So by the time you got to the eastern part of the lake with that long fetch, there were waves of 20 and 30 feet, and they described that in terms of the frequency, when you have average wave heights of a certain amount, there's a mathematical calculation, say 1 in every 100 waves might produce wave heights double the average maximum or more. So by using those numbers, the article points out that there probably could have been some waves every so often that they would be waves of 30 or 35 feet that were coming into the eastern part of Lake Superior that created really horrible conditions for this ship and caused the sinking to occur. It's hard to believe it's 44 years. As I remember that, when it occurred. It was a big news story when it did happen. So if you want to read more, I'll put the link here up on the chat. So just hang on 1 second here, and you'll see the chat screen pop up. But and then I'll just switch it back, and um, we'll go take a look at the GFS and see how much of that is in. Maybe we have some of the NAM out again. Let me go back to the NAM 12. Nope. There must be an NSET problem here going on because their stuff is just like really slow. The GFS has just started. So let's come back. I'll do a little bit of long range and we'll take a look at that. And I know that the snow lovers, I've been seeing by the way, I've seen everything ranging from winter is already over before it even started because of the fact that these waves are going by to the west, to the fact that we, on the other extreme, people talking about uh, North Atlantic oscillations going negative at the end of the month and on and on. And I just would suggest that, or that if it snows in November, the winter is over. I would just suggest that you just let things play out the way they play out. Data sets regarding November and the impact on the rest of the winter are pretty small as far as if to try to look at one parameter, snowfall. If it snows in November, then as it happens in New York City, if you go back, just in New York City, for example, if you go back, it looks like it's about a 50-50 split, which really tells you nothing, okay, as far as snowfall is concerned in the month of November and what happens in the winter that follows. So just, and since most winters are below average in snowfall anyway over the long haul, it really doesn't tell you anything. So you see this deep trough that here in the east that we have for the middle of this coming week that lifts out, but you still have troughing in the east in general. And there's another short wave that moves through toward the end of next week. And this does not dig. If you notice that the upper flow digs down all the way to the southeast, and the jet gets pretty far to the south into Florida with the trough in the middle of this week. The next one doesn't quite do that. It does drop into New England. So I think when we see the colder air returning over next weekend, it'll probably be confined to New England and maybe bleed down into the northern mid-Atlantic states. It'll be almost like a backdoor front in a way with this colder air to the north. And then that pulls out, and then the jet kind of tries to relax a little bit, but you still have some semblance of troughing that wants to come into the eastern part of the United States in the longer haul. Now, here, this is very interesting, and we'll see if this is just silliness on the model at this point or not. And I'm just looking at this for the first time, so I would have to do a little bit more digging. But the one thing that I'm noticing here is we go, now we're pretty far out into the long range. This is around the period where a few people are calling for the NAO to go negative. And if you look up here, this is all higher than normal pressures up in northeastern Canada and in the North Atlantic. And suddenly you've got the jet stream, pretty far south of average. And this actually does have a bit of a blocky look to it, if you want to believe it. So we'll have to see if this winds up, was this a one-run wonder or not? But as I said, a few people that look at these sort of things in the teleconnections that like to look in the longer term, a month out or more, have been, lately have been talking about the NAO going negative toward the end of November. And at least from the standpoint of the GFS from last night, it is going that way toward the end of the month. Now, I would just point out something that happened last year, and I will remind everybody of this. The NAO, the North Atlantic Oscillation, went negative for the late November and through a good chunk of the month of December, as I recall. There is such a thing as having too much of a good thing, okay? If you want to look at it for snow lovers anyway. The NAO was so strongly negative and the jet so far to the south that the outcome was that we wound up with the big snowstorm, if you remember, in the southern parts of the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast, in the interior Southeast, and it couldn't climb up the East Coast because there was no traffic in the Atlantic. It just couldn't happen. I'm just pulling back, by the way. I went back 2 runs on the GFS, which has not quite the same look as the 6Z did. The 6Z looked overly bullish. The 0Z, not so much. I mean, the 0Z is kind of trying. The one takeaway I would get, at least from what we're seeing right now, still no sign of that Pacific fire hose. Okay, if we don't, if the Pacific fire hose jet doesn't show up, that would make for a much different kind of winter here in the eastern part of the United States. Notice I said the word different. It didn't say it was anything guaranteed. It could still be something that is not to your liking, okay? I always say be careful of the pattern. The pattern change you want, the pattern change you get are 2 different things, and just be careful what you wish for because you may get it. The one thing I would like to start seeing when it comes to weather systems impacting the east coast of the United States is as important as the state of the jet stream is in the Pacific. It's also very important the state of the jet stream in the Atlantic and what's being produced in the Atlantic. And when we look at what I would refer to as traffic in the Atlantic, it is not quite there. What I mean by that is it would be um, it would be far more bullish for systems if we start seeing some log jams of storms out here in the Atlantic, because that would force them to climb up the East Coast as opposed to just moving up and out. You start to see a little bit of traffic here toward the end of the forecast period up in the North Atlantic, because if you're going to have blockiness way up to the north, it's going to force everything a bit further to the south. So you want to see something out there in order to create conditions that would be more favorable for snow events as we move into the early part of December. So we'll see if it gets there. I'm going to I'll bring up the teleconnections very quickly, and I also one of these days, especially once I'm done with TV and I have the time, I'm going to go back and do kind of a primer on teleconnections and what they mean. Remember, they're just coincident indicators. They're really reflecting what the models are showing at the moment. They are not They're not really that predictive. They just kind of give you the confidence to say, okay, the models are showing very cold air coming into the eastern states. This is what the pressure pattern would look like, and these are calculations based on pressure patterns in different parts uh, of uh, of the Atlantic and in the Pacific, and it's not just one particular spot, but a series of spots, large geography. Part of it even includes the subtropics. Part of it even part of it includes the northern polar regions and some places in between. So we have ridging in the west with the strong PNA, Pacific North America Index, and that also favors a trough in the east. The EPO, the East Pacific Oscillation, which favors higher pressures in the Northeast Pacific and lower pressures in and around Hawaii to the Baja Peninsula, that zone. Those are negative, so that favors colder air. So you got the ridge in the west with colder air coming out of Canada and dropping into the eastern part of the United States. Notice that goes neutral and even goes a little positive as we head toward the longer period. So this at least suggests that we're going to see a relaxation of all that extreme cold coming down. And the NAO is just kind of rolling along through the next 10 days or so, where it's rather strongly positive right now. So things want to move west to east. Then it kind of weakens a little bit, and then it gets down toward the neutral line as we head closer to Thanksgiving. So when we get toward November 22nd, 24th, we're seeing the NAO at the neutral line. This was based on the 0Z model run. If you did it off the 6Z, I would venture to say that the snapshot view of this would be that the NAO would have gone negative toward the end of the forecast period. But it gives us gives us something extra to watch in the scope of things. So I'm going to come back to the chat board here. So give me 1 second to set this up. I think these Sunday morning live streams work well. I don't know what you guys think, but I kind of think they do work well. It frees me up for the rest of the day, and I don't have to worry about coming back to do a live stream at night. And my energy level by the time we get to the nighttime is is oftentimes not good. So a nice crowd this morning. I got 209 people on board today. That's pretty good for a Sunday morning. Um, let's see. Seeing all the regulars here on the chat board, and as Tim points out, that Santa uh, smashed up his sleigh trying to land. I would imagine he would, since there's not a whole lot of snow on the ground. Nice to see Elizabeth Harrison on board. Um, Thank you. And yes, coffee, Cawfee with Cioffi would be a catchy, perfect marketing thing. Thank you so much. Actually, a couple of my colleagues, I just want to tell you, a couple of my colleagues, Addison Green was pushing me to do this also around the same time you had mentioned it to me. And not that I resisted so much, it's just that uh, I had to find a way that it would work. I don't think calling it that for an evening live stream works, okay, because it's past the dinner hour. But it does work on a Sunday morning, so I'm definitely okay with it. And thank you for suggesting it, by the way, Elizabeth. And thanks also if Addison's watching, because he does watch. He just lives by my every word. Addison Green, who, by the way, is on his way to work TV in Houston, which I think which is a great thing. And congratulations um, to him. George Senda, you have a sinus infection you can't get rid of. Even apple cider vinegar and cayenne. Oh my God, that's quite a combination. Those are two of the not the nicest, let's call them not the nicest things in the world to ingest. Apple cider vinegar, although I will tell you, if you ever have laryngitis and you need to get your voice back, especially, when I working TV, um, if I ever have that issue with regards to laryngitis, apple cider vinegar does a great job in giving you, clearing you up for at least long enough to do a couple of TV hits. But my God, the cayenne pepper is not killing it. Cayenne pepper would kill anything that moves, as far as I'm concerned. That's too strong for me. I've never been able to handle that. Thank you very much for forwarding the email, George. I really appreciate it. Of course, the chairman is on board, which is a good thing. And he thanks again, Scott, for mentioning the Edmund Fitzgerald to me. And by the way, if any of you have any ideas about stuff with regards to covering, something for a particular show that you might find interesting, remember, a number of you don't live in my general area, Eastern Pennsylvania to Southern New England. So there might be things that you will be interested in with regards to some past weather or some phenomena. Don't hesitate to mention it to me. Just message me or email me, and I would be more than happy to bring it up if I can. I will try very much to bring it up on the show as a topic of conversation. Doug Crum down in Georgia, getting ready for the big cold that's heading down your way. It's nice to see you on board here this morning, and Robert Woods on taking care of things before the cold arrives down in the Mid-Atlantic states and also into the Southeast coast. Great to see you guys on board. You've got Jason Schaefer on board, which Jason, always nice to see you. What's really unbelievable about 23 Fahrenheit at Gabrisky Airport? It's only about 3 miles from the ocean. I had a long-standing argument for years with a colleague of mine at WPIX. Um, I won't mention his name in order to prevent his shame, but he, for years, doubted the um, the temperatures that would come out of Zabriskie Airport and Gabrisky Airport in West Hampton. And I tried to explain to him, and he lived in Jersey, and he had never really been out my way on Long Island. And everybody seems to have this image of, I don't know why. Long Island is not all beach. It's not a flat place. The southern part of Long Island is on the flat side, and it's not very high, there are no hills. But when you go north of the Long Island, where the Long Island Expressway is, which basically cuts Long Island in half from north to south, the northern part of Long Island is actually quite hilly, and there are some places where the elevation is up over 400 feet. Now, I'm not talking mountains here, obviously, but there are a lot of hills, and there's a lot of weird microclimate that goes on. And where Gabrisky Airport is, when I tell you there is nothing out there but pine barrens, okay, that's it. All right, there's an airport, there are pine trees, and not much else. So it radiates like crazy. Actually, there are corresponding areas in Central and South Jersey do the same thing happens. Take a look at Tom's River, where the Tom's River observing station is on the edge of basically completely undeveloped land in its natural state, and it radiates when you get setups with clear skies and light winds. Those areas um, radiate like mad, and you get these weird temperature uh, differences in a span of only about 15 miles, which is how far I am from Gabrisky Airport. I'm really not that far from Gabrisky at all. And, I could certainly be in the wintertime, if it's a radiation night, I will have temperatures that, let's say, if I go down to single digits or maybe even to near zero or even below zero, where I've been, I've seen West Hampton go down to 10 below, 15 below, even 20 below. So those numbers are real out there, and yeah, it is unusual because they aren't that far from the ocean either. But there's something about that whole area. East Hampton, the same thing. Where the East Hampton Airport is, you get the same thing happening out there, where they radiate like mad. What is my prediction for the New York after today's game, the Giants or the Jets? You're talking about the Futility Bowl. I don't, how did they wind up? They have 3 wins between them, and what, 14 losses or 13 losses, whatever it is. My God, talk about the futility bowl. I'm not even so sure that's going to be that is going to be in some ways a really painful game to watch, no matter which side you're on, because going into it, um, I would have a general fear of losing to either side. And so there's no real good outcome here. There really isn't. It's terrible. Um, it's just terrible. I'm a Giant fan. I don't have any real. I'm not one of these people that in New York, because New York carries two teams. Sometimes you get there's some folks who love one team, but and at the same time, with the same amount of energy that they root for one team, they hate the other one. I have no real feeling one way or the other with regards to the Jets. I mean, it's just I'm just always been a Giant fan. I grew up in the Bronx. The Giants used to play in the Bronx before they went to Jersey, and so that's who I root for. And I'm also a Yankee fan. I don't know if they go together or not. I know more Yankee Giant fan combinations than I know um, Met Giants combinations, but no matter. There are some people who like their team almost as much as they hate the other in New York, and I've never been quite that way. So if the Jets did well, they would do well. But I definitely lean blue. I've got my Giants blanket for the game somewhere with me, so at least I have. Yes, a tie and over. Joe Gaffney. That probably would be the best and the worst outcome at the same time, which would be a tie after playing through overtime, so that everybody that watches the game winds up coming away from it extremely, extremely tortured. All right, why don't we give the GFS one last look before we call it a day? Because that should be out far enough. Uh, let's see. Hang on, folks. Hang in there. By the way, the European last night kind of matched up pretty well with the with the GFS model. So just in case you were wondering about that, and I can actually show that. Those maps are on pivotalweather.com. They have some really, easy, great looking maps to look at when it comes to the European, which is now apparently shareable as they have released the copyright. So here's the new GFS, and you can see it here. Same ideas. And the GFS is trying to create a changeover here tomorrow for Tuesday morning into the afternoon. It's pretty consistent with the other models overall. So it's a quick burst and changeover along the coast. Higher amounts, for, of course, for inland areas. The high moves up into northern New England by the time we get to Tuesday. One of the things just to look, I'm sorry, for Thursday, one of the things to just look for on Thursday, by the way, is, you've got this cold high with a bit of an onshore flow. So look for some clouds. I wouldn't be surprised if we wind up with a little bit of snow shower action later in the day Thursday, kind of a weak warm front type scenario to the south setting up with that colder air sitting over the warm ocean. Hey, you might have a little bit of activity coming in from the east. Just putting it out there. No guarantees from the management, by the way, that it winds up happening. Oh, and as far as this was what the European, you can actually pull up on pivotalweather.com. And I would encourage, by the way, if you are a regular user of these sites, be it Pivotal Weather or Tropical Tidbits, do consider every once in a while throwing a little bit of monetary support, even if it's just a couple of dollars. If you're using these maps every day, these sites don't. Uh, they cost a lot of money for them. They have to have them up on servers and everything else. And if they're asking, if they have setups for donations, do consider it, because they do put in a lot of work for these maps. And if you're using them all the time, it's a nice thing to do. So just putting it out there. So and I do that, by the way. So just so you know. Pivotal weather here. So this is the European close-up view with respect to what the European forecasted last night, which is basically a coating to half an inch of snowfall. And if you go to you could actually pull up. They got it set up with all these different metro areas that you can look at. So you can center it over Philadelphia. You can see what the model is doing, and you can do this for all their models that are available. Why don't we take a look and see if the NAM is available on Pivotal Weather, and maybe we can, if it is, there's the NAM 12 out to 84 hours. Now, each one of the things I would caution is each um, each model, they all have different algorithms that they might use to make their snow maps. So not all snow maps are the same. So I'm just trying to see what they have here. So this is the Kuchera snowfall forecast maps that you're seeing up there. Let's go to the standard ones. That's a that those I have to review as to what the Kuchera maps um, do and how they figure this stuff out. But if you'll notice, at least from the standpoint of those maps, with regards to this thing for Tuesday, really not producing anything at all with respect to snowfall. So I don't know what algorithms are on here. So I got to probably take a look at that and see what the deal is with respect to this. This is initialized. Oh, okay, this might make sense too, since this is an old model run, okay? So this is an old model run, so let me take that back. Let's see if they have, did I pick the right one? NAM 12 hour. Okay, so the bottom line is that at least on Pivotal Weather right now, the NAM goes back from Friday. Actually, this is the Friday night run of the NAM. So we don't have anything new from there. And hold on one second here, folks. Let's just check really fast to see if those missing maps came in here today. And nope, they're still missing. It's just hysterical. We want to see the ones we need to see are not there, and they're still okay. They actually went out to 48 hours. It's still out. It's even the snow map is not out far enough. So we're gonna have to leave it at that and be happy with what we have. So here's our schedule for this week. So tomorrow, and I'm working my regular FiOS One News job this week, Monday through Friday. It's the last week. It's my last week there. So we will probably be doing Joe and Joe weather shows. I'm sure we'll do one tomorrow and maybe for Tuesday for sure. I would think that we might want to take at least a 1 day break somewhere in there, but on Monday and Tuesday for sure. More than likely, we'll wind up doing it every day next week because actually it's the last time that Joe and I will be together. I'm going to be trying to set up Skypes with him. Maybe we'll do it once a week. Perhaps we can do it more often when storm situations threaten in the Northeast and in the northern Mid-Atlantic states. So I'll be working on that. And just as a reminder, I am not going away. I am going to be doing even more than what I'm doing now. So just bear that in mind. This is something that I actually was planning on thinking about, seriously considering doing on my own, leaving at TV at the end of this year so that I could focus exclusively on my online presence. So when we were told that Verizon was shutting us down, it actually was a bit of a blessing in disguise for me because it gave me that needed extra push that I needed to make the decision to go out on my own. It's not an easy thing to do. So so I was really I wanted to do it, but I was I had some fears. But with a little push, I realized that going off the deep end of the pool is not exactly a bad thing. So so thanks for being here on this Sunday morning. I think these Sunday morning live streams are working out quite well. For additional weather coverage, be sure to consider my weather platform on Patreon. It is just $2 a month, and you get a lot of extra weather stuff, including extra weather videos that are just exclusive to Patreon members. And it's at patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Cioffi. I've got links all over the place, including links on this live stream descriptor, or if you're watching this on a replay, the descriptor to this video. Also, for free, download my weather app, the Meteorologist Joe Cioffi weather app, which is on Google Play or on the App Store. And you can actually watch live streams and videos on the app itself. So it makes your life easier, and you get local forecasts for your area. It defaults to your location. So that's a plus as well. I mean, I write about my area, eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. But when you go to local forecasts, it will default to your location and bring up your local area. So and their National Weather Service forecasts, which don't tend to change every 6 hours as radically as some of the other silly weather apps that are out there that will go from giving a coating to an inch. 6 hours later, it's a foot or more. 6 hours later, after that, it's rain and 55. 6 hours after that, it's sunny and 30. So you don't have any of that nonsense. There's much better consistency with regards to forecasts. If icons are what you want, if you want something more detailed, that's there too. If you want to get really in depth, that's also there as well. And also, if you have an Android device, download Angry Ben's weather app, the Angry Weatherman. Not yet available for iPhones, but hopefully in the next couple of weeks we will have it available for iPhones. And I think I've pretty much covered it. So thank you very much. It was nice to see well over 200 people here on board for this live stream. Um, I think we're on to something. All right. Have a great Sunday. Go Giants, I guess. If you're a Jet fan, go Jets, I guess. And let's hope that they don't finish in a tie. All right. Have a great day. Watch for website posts and app posts later on. And Patreon members, you'll probably get a weather in 10 later today. Goodbye, everybody.